They never fought each other directly. They used a person as their battlefield. In the neon-drenched, perpetually frozen winters of Minneapolis, secrets thrived in the underground clubs where the steam of human bodies met the icy air. It was a world Prince owned, a kingdom of funk and soul he ruled from the shadows. He wasn't looking for a new artist that night in late 1985. He was hunting for a sound, a frequency that existed only in his head. He slipped into a club called the Crimson Tunnel, a place so deep underground you could feel the city's pulse through the floorboards. It was a dive, a beautiful, grimy cathedral of raw talent and desperation. He sat in a darkened corner, a ghost in a high-collared coat, invisible to everyone but those who knew what to look for. And then he heard it, a voice that cut through the smoke and the cheap liquor like a shard of glass. Her name, they said, was Aura. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense. She was striking, almost alien, with eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets and a mane of untamed hair that moved like a living thing. But her voice was a paradox. It held the gravelly pain of a forgotten blues singer, the ethereal highs of a choir angel, and the raw, untamed power of a rock and roll siren. She wasn't just singing songs, she was channeling them. Each note was a story, each silence a confession. The crowd was mesmerized, but Prince saw something more. He didn't just see talent, he saw a vessel, a perfect, unformed conduit for the music that tormented his waking hours. He saw a weapon. While the world was debating who was the true king of pop, him or Michael Jackson, he realized the game wasn't about who could create the next hit. It was about who could discover the next universe. And in Aura, he heard the sound of 1,000 exploding suns. He didn't approach her that night. That wasn't his style. Instead, a discreet associate handed her a single folded piece of lavender paper as she left the stage drenched in sweat and anonymity. There was no name on it, only an address, Paisley Park, and a time, midnight. No other instructions. For anyone else, it would have been cryptic, even menacing. But in Minneapolis, everyone knew. An invitation from the ghost was a command. Aura, who had been singing for scraps and sleeping on couches, felt a tremor of fear and destiny. She knew her life, the one she had always known, was over. She was about to step into the world of a king, unaware that she was about to become the most coveted pawn in a silent war for the soul of pop music. The battle for the throne wasn't going to be fought on stage or on the charts. It was going to be fought inside the heart and voice of a girl nobody had ever heard of.
Paisley Park was not a studio. It was another dimension, a sprawling, sterile white complex that hummed with a strange energy, a place out of time where night was day and the only clock that mattered was Prince's internal rhythm. When Aura walked through its doors, she left the real world behind. The complex was a monument to his genius and his paranoia. There were no windows in the recording studios, only meticulously controlled lighting that shifted from deep purples to electric blues. The air was thick with the scent of incense and an unspoken set of rules. No eye contact unless he initiated it. No speaking in the hallowed Studio A unless you were singing. No meat, no outside influences, no clocks. Time was a fluid concept, measured in albums, not hours. For Aura, it was a gilded cage. Prince became her sole architect. He stripped her down to her rawest form, meticulously rebuilding her sound, her style, even the way she thought about music. He wasn't a producer, he was a creator, and she was his clay. Their sessions were legendary and nocturnal, often lasting for days without a break. He would push her to the brink of exhaustion, forcing her to sing phrases over and over until her voice was raw, until she wasn't just singing the note, but feeling its color, its texture, its soul. He wrote songs for her that were unlike anything he had ever released. They were dark, spiritual, complex symphonies of funk, rock, and gospel. Songs with titles like Velvet Spatic, Electric Ghost, and Silence in Color. They weren't meant for the radio. They were meant to be scriptures in a new musical religion, and Aura was to be its high priestess. She was his secret, his ultimate creation, hidden away from the world. He was terrified of the industry diluting her power. "The world isn't ready for you," he would whisper to her in the purple twilight of the studio. "They will try to make you a product. I will make you a phenomenon." He saw himself as her protector, her savior from the commercial machine he so despised. But his protection was a form of possession. He controlled who she spoke to, what she listened to, what she wore. She was isolated, living in a beautiful, soundproof prison where the only voice she heard was his. She was becoming a masterpiece, but she was losing herself in the process. She was Prince's sound, Prince's vision, but what about her own? The question lingered in the silent moments between the endless recording sessions, a ghost in the machine. She was a star in a universe of one, unaware that her light had already breached the walls of the fortress and been seen by another king, one who ruled a very different kind of kingdom.
The leak was an act of betrayal. A disgruntled sound engineer, fired by Prince for wearing the wrong color shoes to a session, smuggled a cassette tape out of Paisley Park. It was a rough demo, just Aura's voice over a simple keyboard melody. He sold it for a pittance to a music journalist. But the tape didn't end up in a magazine. It was intercepted. Someone in Michael Jackson camp heard about a secret weapon being forged in Minneapolis and paid a small fortune to acquire the tape. The cassette was flown by private jet to Neverland Ranch, where it was delivered to Michael as he sat in his private theater. He cleared the room, the lights dimmed, and he pressed play. What Michael heard was not just a voice, it was a threat. It was raw, pure, and held a power that was the antithesis of his own polished perfection. His music was about precision, spectacle, and universal appeal. This voice was about danger, mystery, and raw, untamed emotion. He recognized it instantly for what it was: Prince's answer to his global domination, a move on the chessboard he hadn't anticipated. For years, their rivalry had been a cold war fought through subliminal disses and lyrics and passive-aggressive encounters at award shows. Michael saw this as a direct escalation. But he also saw an opportunity. Prince wanted to keep her a secret, to mold her in the shadows. Michael's genius was in the light. He wouldn't just match Prince's move, he would steal his queen right off the board. His approach was the polar opposite of Prince's. There were no cryptic lavender notes. Instead, a team of high-powered lawyers and executives from his label descended on Minneapolis. They found Aura on one of her rare supervised trips into the city. The meeting took place not in a sterile studio, but in a lavish hotel suite overlooking the city lights. They didn't talk about art, they talked about power. They showed her marketing plans, album covers shot by world-famous photographers, stadium tour projections. They offered her a multi-million-dollar contract, a Super Bowl halftime show, a global brand. Michaels himself joined via a video call, his voice soft, almost hypnotic. He didn't speak of her as a vessel, but as a superstar. He wants to make you an icon for a secret world. I want to make you the queen of the entire world. He promised her freedom, fame, and a fortune beyond her wildest dreams. It was a perfect, irresistible poison. For a girl who had been living in a purple prison, the bright, shining light of Michael's world felt like salvation. She was being offered a choice: be a secret masterpiece for an audience of one, or be a global sensation for an audience of billions. Aurora's decision to leave Paisley Park was a declaration of war. She didn't just walk out, she vanished, spirited away by Michael's team and a black car in the dead of night. When Prince discovered she was gone, the silence in Paisley Park was said to be deafening. It wasn't just the loss of an artist, it was a profound personal and artistic betrayal. He saw Michael's hand in it immediately. It wasn't a business move, it was a violation. He had shown his rival his most precious creation, and his rival had stolen it. The Gold War had just turned hot, and Aurora was now the battlefield. She was flown to Los Angeles and plunged into the heart of the pop machine. The intimate, incense-filled studios were replaced with massive, state-of-the-art recording complexes filled with an army of the industry's best producers, writers, and session musicians. The battle for her soul was fought through music. Michael's team began crafting her debut album. The songs were brilliant, explosive pieces of pop engineering. Titles like Starlight Echo, Heartbeat Millionaire, and Own the Night. They were designed for stadiums, for radio waves, for global domination. The production was immense, with layers of synthesizers, drum machines, and orchestral hits. It was the sound of inevitable success. But through back channels, Prince began his counterattack. He sent her demos, smuggled to her through trusted friends. They were the songs they had worked on, now fully realized, raw and bleeding with a sense of betrayal and longing. The lyrics were no longer just spiritual. They were direct messages to her, warnings her about selling her soul. One song, Gilded Cage, Velvet Lies, was a heartbreaking ballad about a bird who chooses a diamond cage over the open sky. Aurora was trapped between two titans, two opposing gravitational forces. In the studio with Michael's team, she was pushed to be brighter, louder, more commercial. Her unique vocal imperfections were polished away with technology. Her lyrics were simplified to be more relatable. They were trying to turn a storm into a summer breeze. Then, at night, she would listen to Prince's tapes, and his voice would whisper in her ear, reminding her of the artist she was meant to be, the raw power she was being forced to suppress. The two albums, the one being made and the one that could have been, were a perfect reflection of their creators. Michael's was a perfect, gleaming machine. Prince's was a flawed, beautiful, human heart. The pressure was immense. Industry executives, sensing the legendary conflict, began hyping her as the next big thing, the artist who would unite the sounds of Minneapolis and Neverland. But in reality, she was being torn apart by them. Her voice, once a source of pure power, became an instrument of their egos. She was singing their songs, fighting their war, and her own voice was getting lost in the noise. The breaking point came during a high-stakes recording session in a legendary Los Angeles studio. The entire label brass was there. Michael Jackson himself was observing from the control room, a silent, imposing figure behind the glass. They were recording the lead single, Own the Night, a song destined to be a global anthem. It was the culmination of months of work, a multi-million-dollar gamble. Aura stepped up to the microphone, the slick, powerful instrumental track blasting through her headphones. She looked out at the faces in the control room, producers, executives, her manager, all staring at her with expectant, hungry eyes. In that moment, she didn't see supporters, she saw vultures. And behind them all, she could feel the ghost of Prince, a shadow of disappointment from 1,000 miles away. She sang the first verse, her voice flawless, powerful, exactly as she'd been coached. It was perfect pop. It was also a perfect lie. As the chorus swelled, a wave of rebellion or perhaps self-preservation washed over her. The slick lyrics died on her lips, and she began to sing something else. Out of her mouth came a melody that was raw, dissonant, and achingly beautiful. It was a piece of Electric Ghost, one of the dark, intricate songs Prince had written for. The lyrics were about losing one's reflection, about becoming a beautiful echo in someone else's machine. The producers in the control room froze. The track played on, but Aura was in another world, channeling the ghost of Paisley Park, her eyes closed, her voice finally her own again. Michael Jackson stood up, his face an unreadable mask of fury. He didn't say a word. He simply turned and walked out of the control room. The message was clear. The session was over. The project was over. The silence that followed was heavier than any music. The executives who had seen her as a winning lottery ticket now saw her as a liability, an unstable asset. They accused her of being unprofessional, of sabotaging her own career. They threatened lawsuits, but Aura was numb. She had committed career suicide, but in doing so, she had reclaimed a piece of her soul. The fallout was swift and brutal. The label shelved the album indefinitely, writing off millions of dollars. Her name was blacklisted. She was dropped by her management and abandoned by the machine that had promised her the world. She tried to reach out to Prince, but her calls were never returned. To him, her initial betrayal was a wound that would never heal. She had not chosen his art, and in the end, she had not chosen Michael's fame either. She had chosen herself. And in the world of kings and thrones,
That was the one choice that was not allowed.